The Honorable, the Speaker.
Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this house here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen, Amen, Namaste.
Affirmation. Announcements by the Speaker.
Honorable members, Dr. Lakram Bodo, MP, member for Faizabad, and Ms. Marlene MacDonald, MP, member for Port of Spain South, have requested leave of absence from today's sitting of the House. Mrs. Christine Nualo Hussain, MP, member for Kamuto Mantinilla, has requested leave of absence from sittings of the House during the period July 4th to July 8th, 2016. The leave which the members seek is granted. Honorable members, Mr. Patrick Manning, former Prime Minister and Member of Parliament for San Fernando East, passed away on July 2nd, 2016. Many of us have had the opportunity to serve very closely with him in this House, or at some segment in his 44-year span of service to this country. I now invite honorable members to pay their respects. The Acting Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On behalf of the People's National Movement, on behalf of the Government of Trinidad and Tobago, on behalf of the substantive Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, and on my own behalf, I rise today to pay tribute to one of Trinidad and Tobago's finest sons, Patrick Augustus Mervyn Manning, our former Prime Minister, opposition leader, and political leader of the People's National Movement. He was a statesman, a visionary, and perhaps the best demonstration of a career public servant. Today, we mourn the passing of not only a man, but the end of an era in the political history of Trinidad and Tobago. There will never be another Patrick Manning, No one can take his place or do what he did. Mr. Manning was born on the 17th of August 1946, and but for the times when he served his country as Prime Minister and resided in Port of Spain, he remained a Southerner to his heart until his passing 2 days ago. A former student of Presentation College, San Fernando, and the Mona campus of the University of the West Indies, and a geologist by training, Mr. Manning served as Member of Parliament for the San Fernando East constituency from 1971 until 2015. His record of 44 unbroken years of parliamentary service is likely to remain untouched for a long time to come. He was the fourth and the sixth Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, from December 1991 to November 1995, and again from December 2001 to May 2010. He was also political leader of the People's National Movement for 23 years, from 1987 to 2010, and was also leader of the opposition twice, from 1986 to 1990, and again from 1995 to 2001. There is so much that has been said, Madam Speaker, about Mr. Manning since his passing. He has been described by many as the quintessential statesman, always elegantly clad, smiling with the public, and very affable in his interactions with others. However, those who were brave enough to meet him on the domino table knew the danger that lurked behind his smile, for he was calculating, strategic, and simply brilliant at that game. His passion for the game of dominoes, nurtured and developed during his academic sojourn in Jamaica, was matched only by his passion for music, and classical music at that. It was that same passion he desired to instill in the hearts of the many young persons who became involved in the classical music band Divine Echoes, which he saw as an instrument to expose youth to a more sophisticated form of music. Madam Speaker, the national and regional outpouring of grief we have witnessed over the past 2 days comes as no surprise to the PNM, especially from our young and not so young citizens. I was especially heartened to read the comments of some students who were rescued by Mr. Manning when their academic future seemed uncertain, because it was for them that he devoted a significant portion of his energy. He had a special interest in education, and the evidence of this fact remains there, for in successive budgets under his stewardship, education received a huge portion of the national pie. He felt that once the country focused on education, this would lay the foundation for our children to take up the mantle of leadership as they came of age. Madam Speaker, you will recall that it was during my stint as Minister responsible for tertiary education that I had the honor to introduce in 2004 the Government Assistance for Tertiary Education GATE program. That singular act, fully supported, championed, and enhanced by Mr. Manning in 2006, when he opened up the gate to all, opened the gateway for thousands of citizens who hitherto would have been unable to afford it, to pursue their dream of attaining a tertiary level education. When combined with the creation of the University of Trinidad and Tobago, there was an exponential increase not only in the number of persons accessing tertiary level education, but concomitantly in the quality of life of our citizenry. Such was the breadth of Mr. Manning's vision, Madam Speaker. And this is why he was always hurt by the critics of his vision for Trinidad and Tobago, encapsulated under the banner of Vision 2020, which I dare say was misunderstood at the time, but is now becoming more and more apparent as a fantastic vision. Today, as we pay tribute to him, we do so in a building complex, the International Waterfront Center, that form part of his vision for the regeneration and revitalization of the city of Port of Spain. Only last week, our Honorable Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister, opened the new tower that would house the Ministry of Education, and in the upcoming months we will open as well the remaining buildings in the government plaza. Notable among these developments, Madam Speaker, is a cluster of buildings to house the Custom and Excise Division already open, the Board of Inland Revenue, Immigration, and Ministry of Legal Affairs buildings. I am equally certain, Madam Speaker, that it must have been a source of concern for him to return to his beloved San Fernando to see the dissembling of his vision for the Chancery Lane complex, envisaged as a one-stop shop for the decentralized government in the Southland, where the offices of the Attorney General, DPP, Ministry of Legal Affairs, and a modern public library, among many other public service offices, would have been housed. This magnificent building in San Fernando was designed to bring public service delivery in our second city into the modern era. Madam Speaker, many of the initiatives of Mr. Manning were not obvious in his time. But today, on behalf of those on this side, we publicly say thanks to him for his towering vision and foresight. Trinidad and Tobago would certainly not be the economic powerhouse that it is today without his leadership, particularly in the energy sector. Countless examples of Mr. Manning's visionary and transformative leadership can be found throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago, its effects transcending class, ethnicity, gender, religion, and geography, from CDAP to GATE, from CPEP to UTT, to the managed flotation of the Trinidad and Tobago dollar in 1993, described as one of the best planned and executed policy interventions undertaken since independence. Mr. Manning's foresight, meticulous attention to detail, and ability to see further than most marks him as a leader way ahead of his time. Indeed, he was the embodiment of the term statesman, someone who comes along once every few decades to make an indelible mark on society and the world at large. He was associated with so many projects and innovations, far too numerous to mention. When we were in government, I recall his early morning calls. I am not an early riser, but I recall Mr. Manning's early morning calls, usually at 6 a.m. when I was fast asleep, when he would call for an update on new projects and programs that we were working on in the various ministries that he had appointed me to. I knew that there were others that he called at 5 a.m. every day. His appetite for new ideas and concepts that would transform Trinidad and Tobago was almost insatiable. He was a prodigious taskmaster, always full of advice. He would always advise us to be open, to be attentive and firm, but above all, to be polite. And it was this respect for the other person which saw him treat the people of the Caribbean in a particular way. He was the epitome of the Caribbean man. Epitome of the Caribbean man. CARICOM, its progress and its challenges were always dear to his heart, and he counted amongst his personal friends several of the region's prime ministers, past and present. There is no doubt that the suddenness of his passing has allowed us to illuminate the abundance of his accomplishments. And particularly for us on this side, we know that we have lost a mentor and a hero of the People's National Movement. It was his determination that rescued the PNM after the sound thrashing we received in 1991. It was his willingness to subject himself to criticism that allowed the PNM to claw its way back to power in 2001. Mr. Manning was unique. He made great demands, first of himself and then of others. He refused to accept failures. He remained undaunted by the prospects that something had not been done before. When he spoke, he did so with authority, and many wondered how he came to possess such knowledge. But he knew every detail of projects being undertaken by his government, and often took charge of the overall picture, shaping the details one by one, willing to sacrifice popularity for the greater good of Trinidad and Tobago. Today I see our people in shock with tears in their eyes, but I suspect that none could experience the grief of this loss more than the Manning family. And so, on behalf of a grateful nation, I say thank you to Hazel, David, and Brian for sharing with us the gift of their husband and father for the past 44 years. We knew it came at a tremendous cost to you as a family, and for that we are heavily indebted. Today, I say to the citizens of this great republic that even in this hour of darkness, the indomitable spirit of Patrick Augustus Mervyn Manning lives on, and therefore we must not lose his spirit. He left us a path on which we will continue to march with conviction and faith. The peak of political, economic, and social development to which he led us still remains open, and from it we can behold the landscape of the new tomorrow which we, the administration of today, will lead our people. Madam Speaker, as the nation mourns Patrick Manning, on behalf of the PNM and the government, the substantive Prime Minister, and on my own behalf, I ask that there be prayers of unity and spiritual uplifting as we celebrate his life. To paraphrase one of his most famous election war cries, as he continues on his journey to a better place, one he thought about often, we must let him know that he was admired in the East, in the West, in the North, in the South, and in Tobago. May he rest in peace, Madam Speaker.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to join the nation in mourning the death of former Prime Minister Mr. Patrick Manning, who served in this honorable House for upwards of 44 unbroken years. No one in our country has served the people that long, and that alone is testament to the former Prime Minister's dedication, first to the people of San Fernando East, and to our country, and indeed to the region. There are some famous words from William Shakespeare, which I would like to quote as follows. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. In Mr. Manning's case, only one of these applied to him. He was neither born great, nor did he have greatness thrust upon him. He was born a simple, humble man, who achieved greatness through dedication, hard work, and a deep commitment to his party and to Trinidad and Tobago. Greatness, Madam Speaker, was what he achieved on his own. He was one of 3 PNM members who survived the political tsunami of 1986, but he faced the challenges ahead with the strength of a true leader. Many people facing those circumstances would have given up and walked away, but Mr. Manning did neither. His party then needed his leadership, and that is what he provided. And to, I guess, the surprise of many, and of course to the pleasure of many, he rebuilt his battered party and triumphantly led his party back to office in 1991. It took courage and a clear vision to achieve such a feat. And when circumstances sent him back to opposition, he remained steadfast in his determination to guide his party along a path that he defined. And that resilience is what caused him to return to government with clear mandates in 2002 and again in 2007. For us, Mr. Manning was indeed a very worthy opponent. We stood on different sides in the political battlefield. We crossed swords on many issues. We had different visions on how to take our country forward, but the common thread was that we were all committed to Trinidad and Tobago, and that our respective visions were developed out of love for country and commitment to the enhancement of the life of the people of our land. That, Madam Speaker, is what leadership is about, and that is what defined the life of the former Prime Minister, the Honourable Mr. Patrick Manning. Yes, for some, he was a new kid on the block when he entered Parliament in 1971 as a member for San Fernando East, the successor to Mr. Gerard Montano. From that beginning, Mr. Manning rose to become a respected leader at home, in the Caribbean region, and internationally, not because greatness was thrust on him, but because he was determined to learn and follow before leading. He learned well from his leader, the father of the nation, former Prime Minister Dr. Eric Williams, and indeed from his other political contemporaries and mentors. Perhaps the most important lessons to him were about loyalty and commitment. Indeed, when I sat on this side, in a time of greater controversy and turmoil, he passed me a note, and in it he said, and this was in early 2010, in that note he said, "Those who come to you first may be those who will leave you first." And very, very, warning words from him. But to him, loyalty and commitment were matters of great importance. He faced many setbacks in his career. He had to wait 10 years before getting a full ministerial position, but he never lost patience or turned against his party. He used the time to learn, and we think, Madam Speaker, he learned exceedingly well. Mr. Patrick Manning was not just a true patriot. He epitomized what a politician should be. He was one of the most dedicated members of his party, and he never lost hope or deserted his party, even in some of his darkest hours. He sincerely believed in the greatness of his party and his motto, that it will always prevail. I think, and we do think, that no PNM leader fought as hard as he did to make that happen. And he took responsibility for his actions. When his party faced humiliation on May 24, 2010, Mr. Manning took full responsibility. And though he was literally chased out of the leadership by some, his loyalty never waned. And I think that is a very striking characteristic of an outstanding leader, and that is who the former Prime Minister, the Honourable Mr. Patrick Manning, was. Even though his health was failing, he was prepared to return to Parliament in 2015 to serve his constituents, but that was not to be. Very clear signals were sent that it was time for him to leave. And most people would have been bitter and resentful, not Mr. Patrick Manning. He put aside his differences and humiliation, and he supported his party throughout. He sat in opposition more than once, but his focus never shifted. His commitment remained unshaken, and he achieved what no other leader of our country ever did. Trinidad and Tobago will remember him as the only leader who has been in and out of office twice. In 1995, he could have returned to government in a coalition, and of course we were, at that time, we were voted into government. But he chose to remain. Instead of joining any coalition, he maintained the PNM's independence and preferred to walk away from office, knowing that keeping focus would take him back to government. And it did. Indeed, it did. Mr. Manning served his people with integrity and loyalty. He worked with a range of other people to achieve the greatest good for the general population, often with people who held conflicting political views. His strength of character defined him, as did his deep sense of humor, his laughter, and his infectious charisma. And I think no one would forget the dimples that went along with that charisma. Even his harshest critics agree that Mr. Manning was an outstanding and charming gentleman. He was never afraid to stand up and say what he felt was needed to be said, even though at times to some it may have seemed to be politically incorrect. And while many of us would continue to challenge some of the decisions he made, at least we know that he had a vision that charted a course for the decision he made. And I have no doubt that in all sincerity he believed that whatever actions he took were in the best interests of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Manning inspired many young people to work hard and to stay focused in order to achieve success. His wife Hazel said what made her husband special, a special politician, was his love, charisma, and commitment to our youth. Mr. Manning demonstrated that commitment with the establishment of GATE, as our colleague mentioned earlier, building on what a previous government started with the dollar for dollar program. But it didn't matter where the idea originated. What mattered was it was good, and he improved it so future generations would benefit from education. I endorse the sentiment of the sitting Prime Minister, Dr. Al-Rawi, who said, Mr. Manning made development and the well-being of Trinidad and Tobago a priority, and in doing so dedicated his life to serving our twin island state, end of quote. We have lost a role model, a brother, a father, and friend. Today, the nation is in grief for the loss of a true patriot and a great leader. The loss we have suffered would be felt for many months and years to come. Today we mourn his passing, but we also celebrate his life as a courageous leader who put country first. Mr. Manning will remain immortal because people die only when we forget them. And I say, who in all honesty can forget Mr. Patrick Manning, who guided his party and this nation through some very difficult times. There comes a time for all of us when the body dies, but the soul lives on. In the words of poet John Donne, one short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Former Prime Minister, the Honourable Mr. Patrick Manning's voice will no longer be heard in this august chamber, but he will continue to live and to occupy our thoughts. Let us remember the happy times, the laughter, and everything that made Mr. Manning special to our nation. Madam Speaker, I close with the words from Corinthians 5:6-8. We know that while we are at home in the body, we are away from the Lord, for we walk by faith, not by sight. Yes, we are of good courage, and we rather be away from the body and at home with the Lord. Madam Speaker, let us pray that while he's gone to be with our Father, he will continue to remain with us, continue to watch over us, even as his soul finds eternal rest. I join with my colleagues, and on behalf of the opposition, and indeed on my own behalf, we offer our condolences to his family, to his wife, Mrs. Hazel Mandel, who herself served in a public capacity, to give them the strength and the peace in this hour of grief. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honourable members, today we convene this parliamentary sitting with knowledge of the passing last Saturday, 2nd July 2016, of a former member of Parliament for San Fernando East, of our nation's longest-serving legislator, and a former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Patrick Augustus Mervyn Manning. As a nation, we were informed of Mr. Manning's hospitalization early last week, but little did we anticipate that his death would be so soon. This occasion should confront us with a deep sense of our own mortality, our own fragility and vulnerability in the face of an unknown future. Who am I? Where am I going? These are the existential questions that probably arise in the shadows of our mind at this time. Those questions are usually in the shadows because they are the ones that the majority of us rather not consider, as they force us to be real with ourselves. They force us to be authentically honest and to realize that in contemplating our individual and collective experience of Mr. Manning, we are really contemplating our own attitudes towards life, death, and dying. Those of us who had the experience of working and interacting with Mr. Manning would bear testimony to the fact that one of his favorite statements of encouragement or motivation was of biblical origin. To whom much is given, much is expected. That statement aptly encapsulated Mr. Manning's gratitude for not only all that he had accomplished or acquired materially, but also for his God-given talents, and additionally colored his approach to selfless service to this country. Thus, as persons gifted with the responsibility for governance of this country, of this nation, much is also expected of us. It may be reasonable that a detached bystander may expect that the primary question for us here gathered in this time of national mourning must be, how can the passing of Mr. Manning help us to be better parliamentarians, better citizens, and above all, better humans? My ruminations have caused me to recall the words of Frantz Fanon, and I quote, "Death is always close by, and what's important is not to know if you can avoid it, but to know that you have done the most possible to realize your ideas, end quote. No one in this honorable house can deny the array of ideas and dreams that Mr. Patrick Augustus Moving Manning realized for the well-being of this nation during his 44 years as a legislator in this parliament in the service of not only his constituents of San Fernando East, but of the entire Trinidad and Tobago. May his legacy be honored with accuracy and truth. May his family find solace in the outpouring of local, regional, and international tribute. And may his soul rest in peace. Amen. I shall now invite all members to stand and observe a minute of respectful silence. Members, you may be seated. Members, I have directed the clerk of the House to convey on our behalf our condolences to the family of Mr. Patrick Manning.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers.
Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers. The report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on a special audit of the Public Transport Service Corporation. And 2, the annual audited financial statements of Trinidad and Tobago Mortgage Finance Company Limited for the year ended December 31st, 2015. I beg to move that paper number 1 be referred to the Public Accounts Committee and paper number 2 be referred to the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee.
Honorable members, the question is that paper number 1 be referred to the Public Accounts Committee and that paper number 2 be referred to the Public Accounts Enterprise Committee. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it.
Reports from committees, Prime Minister's questions.
Member for Point of Peer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Acting Prime Minister, will the Prime Minister inform the House which sites in Tobago are being considered for the Sandals Resort Hotel, as was recently announced?
A number of sites are being considered in North, South, East, and West Tobago.
Member for Point of Peer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will the Honourable Acting Prime Minister inform the House whether he is aware that products of National Flour Mills Limited have been virtually banned from Jamaica, and if so, what steps his government intends to take to address this untenable situation, which constitutes a violation of the Treaty of Chaguaramas?
Acting Prime Minister.
Can't stand up just so, you know. Madam Speaker, we are advised that the products are not banned, per se. There is an issue with respect to testing before the products can enter the Jamaican market. This is taking a long time. And we are hopeful that NFM will work with the regulatory agency in Jamaica to resolve this problem in the shortest possible time.
Member for Chaguanas West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Acting Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister state whether instructions were given by him to permanent secretaries and chairmen of state enterprises and agencies with regard to payment of monies owed to contractors following his recent meeting at the Diplomatic Center with these bodies?
Acting Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, that responsibility actually falls to me wearing my other hat as Corporation Sole, and I am currently formulating the instructions to be given to state enterprises and other agencies with respect to payments of money owed to contractors to see how much money and how quickly we can get payments to contractors.
Member for Chaguanas West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Supplemental to the Honorable Acting Prime Minister. You indicated you're working on the formula. How soon will that formula be completed so that action can take place, so that persons can be prevented from becoming bankrupt?
Acting Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In the first instance, I'd like to correct something in the question. Permanent secretaries were not present at the meeting at the Diplomatic Center. I just thought it was necessary to put that on the record. As you are aware, wearing my other hat, as Minister of Finance, I will be visiting the United States of America within the next 3 weeks to raise a US $1 billion bond, which would put us in funds to make payments to contractors.
Member for Chaguanas West.
So, Madam Speaker, if I were to understand clearly the message of the Honorable Acting Prime Minister to the contractors who have certified payments is hold strain.
Acting Prime Minister.
I thought I answered the question, that I would be, the Minister of Finance will be visiting the United States to go on a roadshow to raise US $1 billion, which will give us the necessary finance to start making some payments to contractors.
Member for Chaguanas West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can the Prime Minister indicate whether the government has reached a final decision regarding the government assistance for tuition expenses, the GATE program?
Not yet. We expect to deliberate on the committee report shortly and make a decision shortly thereafter.
Member for Chaguanas East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Acting Prime Minister. Is it expected that the decision out of that report will be implemented for the new academic year 2016-2017?
Acting Prime Minister.
Thank you. That is the plan, as long as that is feasible. We have to see first what the Committee of Experts is recommending and see how quickly it can be implemented. So it all depends on the recommendations made to the government and the feasibility of implementation of these recommendations.
Member for Tabakit.
Acting Prime Minister, would the report that you are referring to, would the contents of that report be made public so that there will be some consultation with those who are involved and who may benefit or not benefit from GATE, so that the wider public or stakeholders can have input?
Acting Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I can't make a firm commitment at this time, but I don't think there's anything of a national security nature in the report of that committee, so that I would think that, if not the entire report, the salient elements and the important recommendations would be made available to members.
Member for Caroni East.
Honorable Acting Prime Minister, would you be kind enough to indicate whether there were stakeholder consultations in relation to the formulation of the final policy by the members of this committee who were brought out? And if there were consultations, who were the stakeholders who were involved?
Acting Prime Minister.
I am not in a position to tell you the extent of consultations that were taking place. But you have to understand a committee was established under the stewardship of the Ministry of Education. That committee is now to report to the government, and we will take appropriate action. I can assure you that the government will not act whimsically or recklessly, and whatever consultation is required will be done.
Member for Chaguanas West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Honorable Prime Minister, Acting Prime Minister, with regard to the recruitment of a Commissioner of Police, can the Prime Minister inform the Parliament what is the status of this process?
Acting Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Police Service Commission is currently pursuing the recruitment process, and only today, at a subcommittee meeting of the Cabinet, we considered a request from the Commission for funding to complete the recruitment process. And a decision on that will be made shortly, which would allow the process to continue.
Member for Chaguanas West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could you, the Honorable Acting Prime Minister, indicate the extent of the funding requested?
Acting Prime Minister.
I would prefer not to indicate the quantum at this time because it is under the active consideration of the Finance and General Purposes Subcommittee of the Cabinet, and we have asked for some additional information.
Member for Couva North.
Madam Speaker, to the Acting Prime Minister, in light of reports in the public domain involving the use of false national identification cards and bogus pension checks, could the Prime Minister state whether such information has come to his attention?
Acting Prime Minister.
Not yet.
Is there a supplemental question? Okay. Member for Naparimo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Acting Prime Minister, could the Acting Prime Minister confirm whether government has taken a decision to close our High Commission in Kampala, Uganda? And what, if any, are the implications of such a decision on future relations with Uganda, East Africa, and other countries to which the High Commission is currently accredited?
Acting Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The government has taken a decision to close the Trinidad and Tobago High Commission in Kampala, Uganda. It has been decided that Uganda and the other East African countries to which the mission in Kampala was accredited will be accredited through the Trinidad and Tobago High Commission in Abuja, Nigeria, thereby continuing the bilateral relations that exist between Trinidad and Tobago and those African countries.
Member for Chaguanas East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, the Honourable Acting Prime Minister indicates that in view of the closure of the Kampala mission, which had accredited status to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which will now be responsible for it?
Acting Prime Minister.
I thank you for that question, and that in fact leads into another point. We have decided to establish a mission in the Middle East which would have jurisdiction over countries of the Middle East. So that we are splitting the responsibilities now. The mission in Nigeria will handle African countries, and the mission in the Middle East will handle countries in the Middle East.
Member for Chaguanas East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Acting Prime Minister, will you be able to give us an idea as to by when that new mission for the Middle East will be open, and where?
Acting Prime Minister.
Thank you. With respect to when, the decision was only recently taken by Cabinet, so I can't give you a firm time. But the location at this time is in the capital of the United Arab Emirates, and we are also considering another mission in the vicinity to serve other countries, other territories, such as Dubai.
Member for Naparimo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could the Acting Prime Minister state whether he's aware of the recent announcement by the Prime Minister of Jamaica, Andrew Holness, to establish a CARICOM review commission to evaluate the effects and the continuation of Jamaica's participation in CARICOM? And if yes, are we assessing its impact, possible impact on our economic growth and development?
Acting Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, the government is aware of the establishment of a CARICOM Review Commission, which was launched in Jamaica just last week on the 28th of June 2016. The feedback so far from our High Commission in Kingston is that the aim of the CARICOM Review Commission, established by the government of Jamaica, is to strengthen Jamaica's position within the regional integration process, which they consider to be critical for Jamaica's economic growth and development over the next 50 years. The Commission, as far as we are aware, has not yet met. It is thus somewhat premature to pronounce on the impact on economic growth and development and the implication for this country's economy. Be assured that we in Trinidad and Tobago are following this matter very closely.
What is occurring at the moment? Does Trinidad and Tobago have discussed this? Have they discussed this? And is there a position that Trinidad and Tobago will be taking in relation to the discussions and the issues that will arise when the CARICOM countries meet to discuss this? Have you decided on a position as yet?
Madam Speaker, as I indicated, it's somewhat premature because this commission has not yet met. I'm sure, however, that the substantive Prime Minister will have some discussion on this matter with his counterpart at the CARICOM Heads of Government meeting, which is scheduled to take place in Guyana. But the extent of any such discussion, I cannot say. We will have to wait for the Prime Minister's return from Guyana in order for a further update on this matter.
Member for Caroni.
Do you have any fears whether 1 from 10 leave north, as happened with the dissolution of the West Indian Federation?
Acting Prime Minister.
Well, that really asked me to give an opinion. And if you wish my opinion, the answer is no.
Member for Naparima.
Is the acting Prime Minister aware that one of the terms of reference of the CARICOM Review Commission is to assess Jamaica's continued participation in the context of benefits or losses in relation to its participation? And do we have or given any assessment of the possible implication of a Jamaican exit from CARICOM?
Prime Minister.
The answer to the first part of that question is yes, we are aware. And the answer to the second part is that the Commission has not yet met, and therefore it is premature to speculate on what will come out of the deliberations of that particular Commission.
Urgent questions.
Member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Works and Transport, can the Minister indicate whether there has been any delays in the payment of salaries, wages to the Unemployment Relief Program workers within the past month?
Transport.
Madam Speaker, as Acting Minister of Works and Transport, I have been advised that there may have been some delays, but I have also been advised that funds have been provided and all outstanding wages will be paid by the end of this week.
Member for Couva South.
Just for clarification, Madam Speaker, could the Acting Minister of Works and Transport and the Acting Prime Minister indicate how much outstanding wages are being owed to these workers?
Acting Minister of Works and Transport.
Madam Speaker, I am not in a position to give details. What I do know, that wearing my other hat as Minister of Finance, I signed the necessary warrant to release all the required funds to the Ministry of Works and Transport to pay the wages of URP workers. With respect to the actual quantum that may be outstanding, and I'm unable to say, but I want to give the assurance based on the information I have received today from the Ministry of Works and Transport that barring unforeseen circumstances, the outstanding wages should be paid by the end of this week.
Member for Prince's Town.
Madam Speaker, through you to the Honourable Minister of Community Development, Culture and the Arts, in light of the government's announcement that funds have been allocated to assist the Islamic community for Eid al-Fitr celebrations 2016, and seeing that the holiday is 2 days away, can the Honourable Minister indicate which organisations will receive funding and the corresponding amounts that will be received?
The Minister of Community Development, Culture and the Arts.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The organizations carded to receive funding for Eid 2016 thus far are the Anjuman Sunat ul Jamaat Association, ASJA, $550,000, Trinidad Muslim League, TML, $350,000, Takviyatul Islamic Association, TIA, $250,000, Al-Madiyah Muslim Community, $220,000, Anjuman Ahmadiyya Ishat-e-Islam, $220,000, Islam Missionaries Guild, IMG, $110,000, Darul Ulum, $120,000, Islam Resource Center, $110,000, Islamic Relief Center, $110,000, Barakpur Islamic Center, $110,000, Alus Sunai Wal Jama Institute, Azwaji, $120,000, Al-Makaz Al-Isan, $110,000, Islamic Ladies Social and Cultural Association, $70,000, Islamic Dawa Movement, $120,000, Muslim Social and Cultural Foundation, $415,000. And just to note, the ministry is in receipt of other applications which are actively being considered.
Member for Prince's Town.
Speaker, through you to the Honourable Minister, can the Honourable Minister indicate whether the government considered assisting all individual masjids, as small as it may be, for Eid celebrations 2016?
Minister of Community Development, Culture and the Arts.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The receipt of grants generally is triggered by the application for a grant, and the ministry actively considers any application made to it for grant funding for any national day or festival.
Member for Prince's Town.
Madam Speaker, to the Honourable Minister, so in effect you are saying no consideration was given to all masjids.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In effect, I'm saying that once an application is made, it is considered by the ministry.
Questions on notice. Questions for oral answer.
Member for Couva North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 165 to the Minister of Tourism.
Excuse me, sorry.
Apologies.
Yes.
I apologize. Madam Speaker, the questions before us, 165, 170, 179, we are craving the indulgence of the House and asking for those questions. Given the fact that we'll be on recess, we're asking for those to be submitted in writing within a week's time.
Answers.
The answers, yes.
Whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In accordance with Standing Order 2910, on the last occasion, when we, at the expiration of the time, Madam Speaker, there was an undertaking that several questions, because I remember the member made a lot of out of the fact that there were 29 questions. 29 questions to be answered out of 30. Out of 30, let me complete. But memory is still good. And at the end of that period, members undertook to submit in writing over 10 questions for the answers. We have not received those answers, so I don't know whether it will go the way of these three answers to these three questions. So perhaps the members should renew that undertaking for us also.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And in keeping with the undertaking that we gave, you will get those answers by the end of before the end of today's sitting. And again, I indicate that we are asking for a week to submit these answers in writing. Same thing.
There are several written answers to questions. Those two will be provided. Question 101, 137, and 144. Those two will be provided within the week. I'm asking.
Yes, Madam Speaker, they will.
So that all questions for today, their answers will be deferred for 1 week and will be provided in writing.
Requests for leave to move the adjournment of the House on definite matters of urgent public importance, statements by ministers, personal explanations, introduction of bills, motions relating to the business or sittings of the House and moved by a minister, public business, government business, bills, second reading.
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The bill before the House is 44 pages long, but the issues that are being addressed are simply the question of resolving an issue with visiting forces and the status of forces agreement between the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the government of the United States of America, the new rates of national insurance, amendments to the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act to deal with electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles, and vehicles using compressed natural gas, an amnesty for corporations and individuals with respect to interests, penalties, and other liabilities, with respect to income tax, corporation tax, petroleum tax, etc., and an amnesty with respect to the filing of annual returns. Madam Speaker, with respect to the visiting forces provisions, this provision did not form part of the fiscal measures announced in the 2016 budget. And I may say much of what we are dealing with today was already announced either in the 2016 budget or in the midterm review. But the visiting forces provisions did not form part of any fiscal measures previously announced. It is, however, extremely important, and it is necessary to treat with it now. It provides for the presence, activities, privileges, and immunities of members of visiting forces. The Act defines visiting forces as, among other things, a body, contingent, or detachments of the forces of a designated state for the time being present in Trinidad and Tobago in connection with official duties. In this regard, Madam Speaker, the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the government of the United States of America entered into an agreement called the Status of Forces Agreement, SOFA for short, in 2009. SOFA was concluded in advance of the hosting by the government of Trinidad and Tobago of the 5th Summit of Americas. And if I may digress, another of the monumental achievements of Mr. Patrick Manning. The SOFA, Madam Speaker, was aimed at governing the presence of United States military personnel in Trinidad and Tobago for the purpose of performing mutually agreed activities in 2009 for the Summit of the Americas. The intention was that SOFA would last for the year 2009 only. It was, however, subsequently decided to renew SOFA in order to govern the conduct in Trinidad and Tobago of other mutually agreed activities by the United States of America military personnel. Part 6, Madam Speaker, of the Visiting Forces Act provides for matters of taxation and exemption to taxation. By way of example, Section 24 of the Act allows that a visiting force may import into Trinidad and Tobago, free of customs duty and tax, equipment for the visiting force and such quantities of provisions, supplies, and other goods for the exclusive use of the visiting force. It was recognized, however, that the Act did not provide exemptions from the liability to pay any tax to contractors from a designated state. So it only dealt with the question of the force itself, the military personnel, and did not deal with the issue of contractors from a designated state, such as the United States, who might be associated with the visiting forces. The Act also does not allow for tax exemptions to contractors from the United States of America in connection with activities under SOFA. To correct this anomaly, we have been advised that a new Section 24A should be inserted in the existing Visiting Forces Act to provide that a visiting forces contractor be exempt from the liability to pay tax. A visiting forces contractor would be any person other than a resident of Trinidad and Tobago who is contracted by a visiting force and approved by the Minister with responsibility for national security for the purpose of providing contracted service to the visiting force. The immediate effect of this amendment is that contractors from the United States of America now present in Trinidad and Tobago and conducting activities in relation to the SOFA would be afforded exemptions from the liability to pay taxes and other charges in relation to such activities. The bill before the House also introduces some consequential amendments in clauses 3A, B, C, and D, and they are all necessary for the implementation of this recommendation. And I expect that the Attorney General will go into some more detail if required. Madam Speaker, you would recall that when I presented the first finance bill in January of 2016, I gave some indication of the Ministry of Finance's legislative agenda for 2016. At that time, I said it was my intention to present to this House a finance number 2 bill, because the previous finance bill was a finance number 1. I indicated then that this bill, number 2, would deal with, among other things, incentives to stimulate the construction industry, particularly to facilitate the participation of the private sector in the construction sector, including the housing sector. I also signaled that the closing of accounts for 2015, the mid-year review, the gambling, gaming and betting control bill, and the insurance bill would form part of the Ministry of Finance's legislative agenda for 2016. As you will be aware, Madam Speaker, the closing of accounts for 2015 has already been completed. It was done in January of this year. The mid-year review was brought to this House on April 8, 2016, and the gambling and insurance bills, as is, where is, without changing a full stop, semicolon, apostrophe, or exclamation mark. In the, I know, in the bills that were laid in this House by the previous administration were laid in this House just a few days ago on Friday, the 1st of July, 2016. And may I say, having laid those bills, it is my intention to collaborate, meet, and discuss these bills with the official opposition to see whether we can have a meeting of the minds and move forward on these 2 pieces of legislation, which I wish to stress were sent to a joint select committee during the last term of the previous government, and in one case, one bill was debated in the Senate, and the other place, the bill was debated in the House. And what we have done is faithfully reproduced what was placed on the table by the former administration. These bills are, in my view, very, very important. We may not be able to, I want to signal, yes, sorry.
Thank you very much, Honourable
Yes.
Minister. You have indicated your willingness for meetings and consultations on these bills, which require a special majority. we would be very willing, with an open mind, to meet with you, unlike the attitude taken by someone else in respect of another debate. And we trust that, given that things I've said, things are not static and would have changed, that you would be willing to accommodate discussions with a view to any amendments that may be necessary.
Madam Speaker, I want to give the Leader of the Opposition a personal undertaking that we will be accommodating proposals, amendments, suggestions coming from the other side. These two bits of legislation are important, and we need to get them into the law books and move on with the administration of insurance and the administration of gambling and gaming. And I was going to make the point before I gave way, is that I don't think we'll have enough time to debate or conclude a debate on these two bits of legislation before the session ends on the 22nd of September. But what I am sure we can do is have our discussions and our meetings so that when we return in the new session, we'll have resolved all of the issues, hopefully, so we can move straight into the debate and passage of these two pieces of legislation as we retable them. Yes, I told them that. Now, Madam Speaker, this Finance Number 2 bill, as I indicated previously, deals with a number of issues announced before, announced in the national budget, announced in various policy statements, announced in the mid-year review, and so on, Madam Speaker. The measures are of two types. Some of them are very specific, dealing with specific issues, such as the need for conservation of energy, the need to encourage people to switch from using fossil fuels towards forms of renewable energy and to forms of energy that have a smaller carbon footprint, which is the case with electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles, and CNG-powered vehicles. And also incentives to stimulate the construction sector, and also measures that are necessary to ensure that the National Insurance Board is in funds to continue paying national insurance pensions. In other words, necessary to ensure the integrity and the stability of the National Insurance Fund. If you will permit me, Madam Speaker, let me go straight into the bill itself. Clause 1, simply the title. Clause 2 is a commencement section, and Clause 2 refers specifically to national insurance. It was my original intention to introduce the new rates, new contribution rates, on the 4th of July. That is the timetable that was given to us by the National Insurance Board in accordance with the actuarial report as to when we need to start supplementing the income to the fund to ensure that the fund can continue to pay its obligations in terms of pension and survivors' benefit and so on into the foreseeable future. But in discussions with the National Insurance Board last week, the board informed me it needed a little more time to consult with stakeholders, to consult with employers, to consult with persons involved in the national insurance system, and they have asked me to defer the implementation of the new contribution rates to the 5th of September 2016. And that is what Clause 2 is intended to do, to give the National Insurance Board the time necessary to engage in consultation with employers and employees to make sure that everybody understands the context of the new contribution rates.
Honourable Minister, would
Sure.
you kindly give way?
Sure.
As you know, we were somewhat ambushed
Yeah,
receiving this bill on Friday, and
I don't
therefore we
dispute
have
that.
not had the opportunity for much consultation. But as you mentioned that you have a concern with the areas dealing with the national insurance, it has been brought to our attention that these changes to the regulations, to the Act and the regulations, amending rates of benefits for employment, injury, death benefit, survivors, retirement, for invalids, sickness and maternity and so on, that contributions payable from September 5th, which is the date that you have indicated, that it would discriminate against current recipients of these benefits. And perhaps I could share what we have here and ask if you may want to reconsider what is happening with respect to these changes. What I'm being told is that new persons coming on stream after the passage of this, they would get a different rate of benefit as versus those already in the system. I'm being told this has never happened in the history of the NIB regulations and act, and about some 3,000 persons are likely to be affected by this measure, and we will want you to look at it. I'll pass you the little note I have that we received from someone who deals in national insurance law with respect to regulations, but it is unprecedented. It has never happened, and whenever there were increases in benefits in the past, those in the existing stream already in receipt of these benefits, as well as those coming in, they would have had it increased. So everybody would be across the board on an equitable basis. So I will pass the note through you, Madam Speaker, and ask you to reconsider this. Perhaps you may want to hold that particular section. When we come back, we can quickly deal with it in the first sitting of the next session. We would not want these people to be in any way disadvantaged or discriminated against. I thank you very much, Honourable Minister.
Okay, what I prefer to do, Madam Speaker, is I understand what the Honourable Member is saying. I will give an undertaking now, and as members should appreciate by now, that so far, I keep my undertakings. So that what I would like to do is to pass this bill today, but I give a undertaking that we will carefully study this measure. This was not brought to my attention. This is not something that has happened overnight. These changes have been in the making for a couple of years. This is something that has transcended administrations. In other words, I didn't get up yesterday morning and dream this up. So these amendments have been in the making for quite some time, and I have not been told up to today as to whether this anomaly exists. I can assure you I will treat it very, very seriously, and we will take appropriate action. But I'd like to get this system through, and of course in September we can sort out any amendment that is required. So if I could move into the National Insurance now. Clause 4, and I've passed the note on to the Attorney General so they can take a look at it. And we have no wish to disadvantage anybody. Madam Speaker, Clause 4 of the bill deals with amendments to the National Insurance Act. Section 70 of the National Insurance Act provides for an actuarial review to be conducted of the national insurance system at 5 yearly or shorter intervals, to assess the balance between contributions and rates of benefits. In accordance with the Act, an actuarial review was conducted over the 3-year period from July 1st, 2010 to June 30th, 2013. And Madam Speaker, let me just repeat that. An actuarial review was conducted over the 3-year period from July 1st, 2010 to June 30th, 2013. So this is something that preceded this administration. This is why I'm a little surprised at the issue, but it's no problem. We will look into it and we will take appropriate action. The main objectives of the review were to assess the long-term financial condition of the National Insurance Fund and to look at possible ways to improve contributions and benefits. The Act at Section 73 provides that the actuarial review be laid in Parliament. In fulfillment of this requirement, Madam Speaker, you may recall that the actuarial review was laid in this House by my good self on the 27th of November 2015 in accordance with the Act. I'm also told that the actuarial review, was laid in the Senate on December the 8th, 2015. So the legal requirements with respect to laying the actuarial review in Parliament were met. Coming out of this actuarial review, it is obvious that there is a need to plan for a combination of future contribution rate increases and measures to reduce the cost of the system. The present contribution rate of 12% is not sufficient to support the present level of benefits in the long run. The recommendation coming out of the actuarial review, therefore, is that the contribution rate should be gradually increased, and a recommendation was made to increase the rate to 13.2%, which we accepted. Madam Speaker, the actuarial review also highlighted that different elements of the national insurance system need to be adjusted to maintain value over time. One of these elements is the maximum insurable earnings. The recommendation is that the maximum insurable earnings be increased to $13,600, and this corresponds to the increase of the average national wage over the period July 1st, 2010 to June 30th, 2013. Another element of the national insurance system is the earning class limits. It is recommended that these limits be increased by the lesser of the inflation rate and the average salary increase, which would result in a 13.3% increase in all earning class bands. You should note, Madam Speaker, that the proposed increases in the maximum insurable earnings and the earnings class band will cause the entire contribution rate table to shift upward, with the result being an increase in the minimum insurable earnings from $180 to $200 weekly, $780 to $867 monthly. The amendments to the Act will impact the following: the earnings classes, the contribution amounts, the conversion rates, and the benefit tables for the basic earned pension rate, increments for retirement and invalidity, survivor benefit, increment rates, sickness and maternity benefit rates, employment injury and death benefit rates. As I indicated previously, it is proposed that these amendments take effect on the 5th of September, and I've given the undertaking that if we need to make adjustments, we will do so in September. With respect to revenue raising and compliance, Madam Speaker, this takes me now to the next section of the bill. Just excuse me. I'll deal with this section now, and I'll come back to what we're doing with vehicles. With respect to revenue raising, there have been several amnesties in the past. I remember one being done by Minister Dukaran, which to my amazement netted $2 billion in that year. I believe it was either 2012 or 2013, but it was a significant sum of money. There are quite a few taxpayers who have not agreed with the assessment of the Board of Inland Revenue and are quite prepared to take the matter to court or are contemplating taking the matter to court. The amnesty measure, while it is not desirable that you have amnesties forever and ever, the amnesty measure has proven to be successful in the past. And in our present economic situation, we thought it necessary to give taxpayers a one-off opportunity to file their tax returns and bring their tax status up to date. Because of the success of previous amnesties, it is believed that the taxes which the state stands to collect far outweigh the penalties to be collected. The amnesty is also expected to encourage taxpayer compliance. This particular amnesty is applicable to income tax, corporation tax, business levy, green fund levy, value-added tax, and petroleum tax. Now, in the bill, Madam Speaker, you will see, and members will see, that in order to benefit from the concession, the taxpayer must have filed outstanding returns and paid all outstanding taxes on or before the 31st of August. But based on representations made from members on both sides of the House, I am seriously considering extending the deadline date for the amnesty to the 16th of September, because it's a short time period, and I think the longer we have an amnesty for, the more tax we can collect. So that one of the amendments, based, as I said, based on representations on both sides of the House, in front of me and at the side of me, I thought and probably behind me too. I thought we could. Now, one of the reasons why I had set it at the 31st of August as the deadline for the amnesty was that the Board of Inland Revenue had told me to be careful about putting the expiry date for the amnesty too close to our tax collection period. Now, honorable members may not know that, honorable members probably are aware that the bulk of our taxes comes in on a quarterly basis. So the 30th of September is an important date for the collection of taxes. In fact, for many companies, September 30th is the end of their financial year, and a lot of companies wait until the end of September to pay their taxes. So we did not want to interfere with the tax collection that would normally take place at the end of September and thereby confuse taxpayers. But based on consultations with the Board of Inland Revenue today, after the representation made from members on that side and on this side, I have consulted with the Board of Inland Revenue, and they see no problem with extending, yes, sense. I would say sense has prevailed. They have told me they have no problem in extending the amnesty to the 16th of September. That's a Friday, by the way. Okay?
I think you are very good at just doing
I'm sorry to hear that. The following measures are therefore proposed. And as I said, we will be amending the date, and I would ask the Attorney General if he could speak to the CPC as we are here, as I'm on my feet, and prepare the amendment to change the deadline to the 16th of September. The amnesty will be offered to all resident individuals and companies who have not filed returns of income for any year up to and including the year 2015. We are going to waive all interest on outstanding taxes, including business levy and green fund levy, due and payable as at 31st December 2015. Once these taxes and levy are paid, and this will now be by the 16th of September 2016. We would also waive all interest charged on any payment prior to the 1st of July 2016 in respect of any tax or business levy and green fund levy due and payable as at the 31st of December 2015. All penalties, further tax and additional tax due and payable on outstanding taxes, including business levy and green fund levy, as at 31st December 2015 will be waived where such taxes or levy are paid during the period, well, 1st July, that is already passed, and the 16th of September 2016. Penalties, further tax and additional tax in respect of taxes, business and green fund levy due and payable as at 31st December 2015 and paid prior to the 1st of July 2016 will be waived where such penalties, further tax and additional tax have not been paid. Penalties on outstanding returns for the years of income up to and including the year 2015 will be waived where such returns are filed by the 16th of September 2016. Penalties with respect to returns for the years of income up to and including the year 2015 and filed prior to the 1st of January 2016 will be waived where such penalties have not been paid. And for the avoidance of doubt, the concessions will not apply to taxes, levy, interest penalty, further tax and additional tax paid prior to the 1st of July 2016. Sure.
Through you, do you have any idea of how much money is outstanding and how much you think you may recover or receive from this measure?
Yes. I have been speaking to the Board of Inland Revenue about this matter for some months now, and the latest estimate given to me is about $500 million. That's what they've told me. Of course, the proof for the pudding is in the eating, and we'll see. Where any returns, taxes, and levy remain outstanding after the 16th of September 2016, the penalties, interest, further taxes, and additional taxes, which would have been payable, will be revived and become payable as if the waiver had not been granted. And I want to repeat this. After the 16th of September, that's it. All applicable penalties and interest will be revived and will become due and payable. So all those business people outside there and individuals, please make your best effort. If you have outstanding taxes, pay them by the 16th of September. if you have annual returns to be filed for your companies, do so by the 16th of September. This amnesty is meant to give citizens the opportunity to honor their tax obligations to the state without penalties and interest accrued over the years. After the period, the state will utilize the full extent of its authority to ensure that compliance with the relevant legislation is followed as we seek to make good on our receivables and our tax base. As I indicated, we are also assisting with an amnesty with respect to the filing of returns. This allows companies to be compliant with Section 516A of the Companies Act. The Companies Act provides that a person or company deliver to or file with the registrar certain documents. Any failure to comply with the Act in this regard entitles the registrar to collect from that person or company a penalty of $300 for every month or part thereof that the person fails to deliver or file a document. And Madam Speaker, I have received many letters from NGOs, charitable organizations, who did not know that I was going to come with an amnesty because I couldn't tell them. And it seems that a lot of NGOs and charitable organizations, they have no understanding of the requirement to file annual returns. And I want to make an appeal to all NGOs, charitable organizations, not-for-profit organizations, and so on. Please file your annual returns. Because when I look at the correspondence that I've received, some of these NGOs owe penalties in excess of $20,000. Some of them have never filed their returns after their first incorporation. So all of us as members of Parliament, I appeal to members on both sides of the House, if you are familiar with any charitable, not-for-profit, or non-governmental organization in your constituencies, please get the message out. They must file their annual returns. There are many of them now who are not compliant. They now have a window of opportunity of just over 2 months to file the returns. It's a simple procedure. Please try and educate your constituents. I'm amazed at some of the correspondence I've got from religious organizations in particular who have said they didn't know they had to file annual returns, but they have incorporated themselves as limited liability companies and so on. So really we need to get that message out. And the filing of these returns is essential for investigations, and information on returns provides a snapshot of key company information available to the public in the verification of details, very important details, like the directors of these entities, their registered office, their shareholders, and so on. These are very, very important pieces of information that the public has a right to know. And I want to stress that the waiver of the penalties for not filing returns is subject to the companies fulfilling their obligation to file and deliver all necessary documents by the 16th of September. And now, Madam Speaker, how much time do I have left? How much?
12 minutes.
That's plenty time.
How much? 12 minutes.
Yeah. I wish to turn to two key measures. One is renewable energy. I've spoken to this at length. The measures in the bill, I believe, are self-explanatory. But what we're seeking to do is to waive all taxes on electric vehicles, CNG-powered vehicles, and hybrid vehicles of a certain size and a certain power. We will adjust the size of the engine, the power of the engine, and so on as time goes by. It is an improvement on what was there previously. We've increased the capacity of the engines of the cars that will be eligible for this incentive, and I really would like to urge all citizens to now take advantage of these incentives with respect to electric-powered vehicles, hybrid vehicles, and CNG-powered vehicles. It will allow us to reduce our fuel subsidy. It will allow us to reduce emissions. It will allow us to conserve, Madam Speaker, and it will bring Trinidad and Tobago into the modern era. I saw an advertisement today. I don't want to promote any company, but I saw an ad with a car. I think it's an electric car in the newspapers today. It's a mid-sized sedan. And in researching this topic, while in the past, I am aware that several years ago, the only hybrid vehicles that were available were either very small or very large. So you had like the Toyota Prius, which is a small vehicle, and then you had very large, sophisticated SUVs and large engine vehicles. But the manufacturers have adjusted the type of vehicles that they manufacture, and they now offer mid-sized vehicles and vehicles that are quite suitable for families. So I don't think I would answer any questions anybody has about these issues, but I don't think I need to go into any more detail about the removal of customs duty, value-added tax, and motor vehicle tax on electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles, and CNG vehicles. I don't think I need to explain why, and I don't think there's anybody in this Parliament, unless I'm mistaken, who will object to this measure. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to deal with them when I am responding in my winding up. Sure.
Is it 1799 cc's or less, or 1999?
1999.
Which one?
1999.
Right, okay.
Okay, that's why I said I adjusted. It used to be 1799, and I thought that was a little bit too small. That sort of left a lot of vehicles out of the loop. So I brought it up to 1999, and there are many vehicles outside there that are 1999 cc's or below. And the power of the engine that I have put in there is quite adequate in terms of electric powered vehicles. With respect to the construction sector, there's a current incentive for the exemption from income tax, gains or profits derived from the initial sale of a residential house site being part of a land development. The incentive is available where the proceeds of the initial sale of a residential house site were received on or before December 31st, 2018. As I've said in a previous speech before this Parliament, I don't think when this measure was introduced there was a proper understanding of how long it takes to get a project going.
Correct.
It could take you 4 years to get the approvals, 1 year to get the bank loan, and then you just have 2 years after that to build it. This with respect to the previous exemptions. So that in order to allow developers, such as member for Tabaquit, I know nobody fighting with you. And let me just say at the outset, Madam Speaker, let me declare my interest. I have been a property developer before, and I intend to be a property developer in the future. And let me declare my interest. I may benefit as an individual, as will the member for Tabaquit. And, well, you ought to declare your own interest. from the measures in this legislation. I just want to say that I'll be up front. Okay? But I'm sure that there are hundreds. Yeah. No, I said in the future. I said in the past. No, up 2025. That's what I'm going to explain now. That the exemptions are being extended for land developments, residential house sites, commercial buildings, and multi-story car parks, which commenced on or after October 1st, 2012, which are currently due to expire in 2018. These exemptions will now remain in effect until the 31st of December, 2025. So it's a long time from now, member for Caroni East. This is why I said I have benefited in the past, and I might benefit in the future. And as I said, the reason is because of the length of time that the construction of buildings takes, including the approvals process. Madam Speaker, we've also introduced a new measure, which was not included in the previous measure, which is the exemption from tax premiums and rents derived from the letting of a newly constructed multi-family dwelling unit. So we had commercial buildings before, car parks, and residential house sites. we're now including multi-family dwelling units. And there will also be an exemption from income tax, just like the current measures, gains or profits from the sale of such newly constructed multi-family dwellings. Again, the construction of the multi-family dwelling unit must have commenced on or after the coming into force of the Finance Number 2 Act 2016, but I will entertain suggestions on that. Similarly, as the measures for residential house sites and commercial buildings, it is proposed that this new incentive for multi-family dwelling buildings, remain in effect until December 31st, 2025. And Madam Speaker, without going into any more detail, I think I've covered everything.
I think so too.
And I welcome any suggestions from members on this side. I get the feeling that the House is in a collaborative mode today. Please prove me right, do not prove me wrong. And I hope if there's any issue that we need to resolve, we can resolve it. And I give the undertaking, if there's any suggestion that honourable members wish to make that makes sense and is in the interest of all concerned and the national population at large, that we will deal with it when we return in September and make any necessary amendments. I might also say there were some typographical errors because we did this legislation in a bit of a rush. And I think members have been circulated with a copy of the bill that has some yellow shading in it where we have been tightening up a few, it's not many, tightening up a few typographical errors, and we will deal with this at the committee stage or at some appropriate interval during this debate. So with those few words, Madam Speaker, I beg to move.
Honourable members, I shall now propose the question. The question is that a bill entitled An Act to Provide for the Variation of Certain Duties and Taxes to Introduce Provisions of a Fiscal Nature and for Related Matters be now read a second time. Sorry, Member for Caroni Central.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute on this Finance Bill number 2, 2016. I must say that I welcome the disposition and approach of the Minister of Finance. And I think that not only is his approach and his tone and disposition welcome, but I think perhaps I don't know if it quite makes up, but it does soften the fact that this bill was brought before this House on Friday while we were engaged in the debate on another bill, and we are now debating this bill here today. So in spite of that, I want to lodge what you might call a quiet protest on behalf of members on this side of the House, because I do feel a bill like this, which is a money bill and which has important consequences, is something that we should be given some more time to address and study. I listened to the Minister, his flexibility of approach, and the fact that he's willing to accommodate any ideas, amendments, etc. And I do think that that is a worthwhile progressive step in the life of this stage of the 10th Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, this Finance Bill number 2 for 2016, we must recall comes as the second finance bill for this year. We had a tentative budget in September 2015, and then we had Finance Bill number 1. I think it would be reasonable to ask, Madam Speaker, if anyone today remembers what was in that Finance Bill number 1, or whether anyone can in fact recall any action that flowed from Finance Bill number 1. Then we had the budget review in April of 2016. To many, it was a sort of a letdown, even bigger than the September budget, I think, on which most people in the country were charitable. And the end result now is that we have this Finance Bill number 2 of 2016. Now, I want to say that we are now entering a period when the Parliament will be in recess, and we will come back in September, and the Minister of Finance will bring another budget in September 2016. So we wait to see at that point what the Minister of Finance will bring for us, and we also look, no matter the change in disposition today, at whether any kinds of tricks will be played between now and September in the period in which the Parliament is not in session. Now, let us look at the Finance Bill number 2. What is it about really? It really is about variations and taxes having to do with, as the Minister himself outlined, in the first instance, the visiting forces, and he specifically mentioned, but I suspect that if we were ever engaged with any other countries, it would also relate to them, visited forces from the United States, based on a legislation that was enacted in 2007. But in this instance, an amendment is being made to include visiting forces contractors who are not covered in the existing legislation. And I must say, he said the Attorney General would explain, perhaps if he needs to, and I really would like to understand it a little bit, because it's not so clear here what covering contractors in this bill is going to mean. And I think citizens need to understand much more clearly what the fact that you are going to introduce contractors to be covered in this bill actually mean. And the reason I ask is because originally it was meant to cover representatives, as I understand it, of the armed forces, so that what you now have are contractors and contracted services to these armed forces, another appendage to what is covered under the existing parent legislation. And the question that arises, if all of these benefits are going to be transferred to these new entities that are going to be covered. Remember, we have passed and amended a procurement law, and I wanted to understand much more clearly what kind of services are going to be covered, what kind of contractors are going to be involved, and what do we envisage in this mutually agreed relationship between forces from another country and resident brought to Trinidad and Tobago for a mutually agreed purpose. So I think it is important to understand this, and I need some clarity on this. First of all, what is the nature of the activity covered by the bill in the first place? Because it was meant to be temporary and it was extended. And secondly, that it is now being amended to include not just the armed forces that were originally conceived, as being covered in this bill, but also the contractors, people whom they might contract. So the first parent act that is being amended is the Visiting Forces Act, which is Act number 8 of 2007, Chapter 1404. The bill before us, the Finance Bill number 2 of 2016, also addresses another parent act, and that is the National Insurance Act, Chapter 3201, together with the National Insurance Contribution Regulations. Now, what is being varied are both voluntary contributions, and the Minister explained that to us, and the rates of benefits under the system. Now, this Act number 35 of 1971 has been amended 16 times so far, as I looked at the history of the bill. And this is the 17th amendment that is going to be made. And in this particular instance, the commencement dates for these improved benefits is now September 5th, 2016. Now, we on this side would have no quarrel with the benefits for citizens who have worked hard and contributed to national development and contributed to the scheme, and to employers who have also contributed to the welfare of their employees. But I want to say, as the Minister himself hinted, and as the actuarial report which he laid before the House some time ago indicates, that the national insurance system in the country presents a challenge for the country. He knows that, and we on this side have been aware for some time, since I would say around 2013 or so. But the National Insurance Act was for a good, you might say it has been good for a time. But in a real sense, what is happening is that it is becoming inadequate to the needs of citizens in our time. Because citizens will be living longer, Madam Speaker, and in this context, they will have more health challenges to attend to. So our approach, if our approach as a government in the last 5 years, and our approach had we been given a second term, and I'm quite aware that we did not get a second term, and that the government consists of the members on the other side. Our approach would have been not just to deal with the national insurance issue, but also to establish a comprehensive health insurance system in collaboration with the private sector. It is something that we committed to in 2015 publicly, and it exists in documents, and that would have been our approach. And we would have also addressed the issue of reform and refinancing of the national insurance system. This would have been part of a comprehensive strategy to establish a number of people-centered initiatives that are integrated. Now, the reason I am making this point is that I am not denying that what the Minister is bringing before this House are a set of measures that really sort of derive out of the budget and review that he presented to the country. But I do want to give the sense of how we think when we think of the business of people-centered development. So that we see a national health insurance scheme and a comprehensive health insurance scheme in collaboration with the private sector. And we see national insurance as something in which many other elements constitute a part. For instance, the widespread land ownership on the basis of land for the landless policy. The widespread home ownership on the basis of a philosophical commitment to a home-owning democracy. The creation of a shareholding democracy, starting with the state sector and encouraging the private sector to follow suit, so that in the end what you would have is a home-owning, land-owning, shareholder democracy in which all citizens would have a stake, all citizens will have the opportunity to acquire equity, and in which inequity would be managed for the peace, stability, and good order that would become the norm in Trinidad and Tobago. And together with that, you have a health insurance scheme, very comprehensive, covering all people, and a national insurance scheme that addresses the question of life after work or life in a situation in which one is no longer able to work for whatever reason. We put people at the center when we were in government, and all our policies were integrated to serve them. And if we were to ever get another opportunity, and I am sure that the population will consider this, we will integrate our policies to serve the people whenever they should give us an opportunity again. So the increasing contributions and benefits that the Minister of Finance is presenting, in a sense, is simply one aspect of a policy of any kind of people-centered strategy from our point of view. And I want to say that many of the proposal that he is making, and I give a sense of fairness to the minister in that he did say that these were things that we had in fact addressed and considered in 2013. So the NIS charges were initiated in the 2013 budget. I'm sure the minister would be aware of that. But for whatever reason, the NIB failed to implement the annual amendments. The series of increases in contributions, coupled with increased benefits from our point of view and offered here by the minister in this bill, is a good move, which we also would have implemented. And we would have done this, increasing both the benefits and the contribution as a means of salvaging the NIS as an institution as the population ages and as people live longer and as the flow of funds now remains too small to sustain the kind of NIS system that we need in the country. But I want to add again that we would also have considered a national health system that would in fact make it possible for all people in Trinidad and Tobago to benefit in a significant way were they ever in need of health services in the country. This is not to deny that most of the public health services in this country are free by and large in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, what do we need from the Minister of Finance, given what he has already told us? I think what we would need from the Minister of Finance, and I hope he will tell us something about this in his winding up, is an update on what the projected status of the fund will be by the next triennial review. Okay, so you had your 2013, and I think we need to have an understanding of what it is likely to be by the next triennial valuation. If these charges, as they will be and as they will be passed today, will be implemented as proposed. So what difference will it make 3 years hence? Now, that is what the Parliament and the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago need to know. We need to assess, therefore, the sustainability going forward of the NIS. The Minister of Finance also needs to tell citizens and this Honorable House, Madam Speaker, what he will be doing with regard to NIS for the self-employed. Now, he did not consider this during this year, and it is possible that he may consider it at some point in the future. our government has started work on this, and I'm sure you will find some documentation on that in the Ministry of Finance. There is a challenge that any Minister of Finance would have to consider, because the NIS for the self-employed can put a strain on the system. We learned that as we tried to implement this measure and tried to take it into consideration. But if it is well thought through, changes in the contribution rate thought through and changes are made in the contribution rate, a sustainable NIS system would be very well established, and we will be able to manage it properly in the best interest of all our people. Right now, self-employed people are not covered by the system. It is something that we have always been concerned about, and we would like the minister to take that matter into account as well. Now, the third piece of legislation, and the minister did not mention this too much, was the issue of the motor vehicles. I don't think you mentioned too much about that. He did talk about the hybrid cars and the electric cars. But the third piece of legislation is the Motor Vehicles and Motor Traffic Act, Chapter 48, number 50, Act number 42 of 1934. Now, this has been amended 92 times. I again looked at the background. So it is a piece of legislation that has been with us from colonial times, and which we have amended on several occasions. This time, the amendment is to exempt, Madam Speaker, from taxes vehicles manufactured to use compressed natural gas, new and used electric vehicles of certain engine size, and in this particular case, he has taken it up to 1999. And also, he has included in the system for tax exemption new and used hybrid vehicles. This is to give effect to fiscal measures outlined in the April 8th budget review. Now, the expiry date for this is December 31st, 2020. So if this is conceived as a measure to reduce carbon emissions and to change human behavior in terms of the motor vehicle marketplace, and in fact the minister outlined both of these two as objectives, and if it is also meant to reduce the proportion of gas and diesel used by guzzling cars on the road, and the minister also mentioned this because he mentioned affecting the fuel subsidy, and knowing that we have about 700,000 vehicles now on the road, we therefore need to establish a monitoring system that would let us know if what we are doing is working, and by how much the patterns are changing, and the level by which carbon emissions are reduced as we travel to 2020, which is the closing date for this particular measure. Now, if we were, Madam Speaker, my apologies, if we were the government today, and again I acknowledge that many people decided in 2015 that you should be the government, but if we were the government, action would already have been taken within the first 120 days to initiate energy conservation measures in all ministries. We have that in our first 120-day plan in our manifesto, and also in government buildings. And the objective would have been to achieve a 20% reduction in energy use by 2020. And that is on page 21 of our manifesto. We would have initiated action to actualize our commitment to a green economy, something which we committed to. What is a green economy? Well, in a green economy, growth in employment and income should be driven by public and private investment that reduce carbon emissions and pollution and enhance energy and resource efficiency and prevent the loss of biodiversity and ecosystem services. So some of the industries, the industrial areas that would have been affected by this are the energy industries, agriculture, tourism, manufacturing, forestry, fishery, water management sectors, and subsectors, all of these providing viable options for diversification with green economic potential. We, the People's Partnership, had targeted knowledge-based industries, food production and processing, ethnic products, services industries, maritime industry, biotechnology, information technology, high-tech manufacturing, alternative energy, and third and fourth generation renewable energy industries. The green economy concept, therefore, embraces social, economic, environmental alignment and harmony. The paradigm of the green economy lends itself, therefore, to a promise of survival, growth, and sustainability while protecting ecosystem value, and which subsequently contributes to poverty eradication. The reason I'm raising these issues is because, again, I understand that the minister is limited by the fact that what he is bringing here are fiscal measures that have to do with presentation made for the budget and for the budget review, and commitments made to the parliament and the population. But the reason I'm outlining these is that these fiscal measures all, when they relate to individual things, also have implications for wider and grander policy. And therefore, if carbon emissions reduction is an issue, if making the economy sustainable and green is an issue, then the policy approach to these things have to be much more comprehensive and much better integrated than we have seen so far from the government. So green policies, for instance, would include land use policy and building approval policies. They would include investment promotion policies in clusters identified, and in our sense, in the sense that we understood it, the growth pole concept for spreading development throughout the country. There would also be zones of economic development committed to green industry development, a dedicated thrust to greening the entire existing manufacturing sector to the extent that it could be done, energy conservation policies in all government and state-owned facilities, I mentioned that, conversion to CNG of the transportation sector on a phased basis, beginning with state-owned vehicles and public transportation, and enlightened procurement policies to support green industry practices. All of these things would form part of a policy. And that would include also the establishment of national parks, the establishment of protected areas, of special development zones to stimulate green practices. It would include active promotion of ICT-based services sector for export expansion. And we would be setting into motion now our comprehensive transportation and traffic management initiatives. Now, what would these have included? They would have included transit hubs for population, population concentrated areas. It would have included dedicated school bus transportation. It would have included dedicated bus services for industrial estate workers. It would have included a predictable north-south, east-west rapid bus systems So our approach was not rapid rail at all. It was, in fact, to use the modes of transport best known, best appreciated, best understood by our population. And we would have established, in fact, a rapid bus transportation, which I hope perhaps the government might consider. It would have included park and ride facilities in Arima, Tunapuna, Sangre Grande, Chaguanas, San Fernando, and Port of Spain. And I see that the minister mentioned the park and ride facilities, the construction of these facilities with incentives. And I commend him on that because that is something that can actually work and make a difference with private sector and public sector involvement. It would have included as well decentralization and the relocation of government ministries and facilities. Because remember I mentioned the 700 cars. So the issue is not just to get people into buses that work. It is not only to get them to park their cars and ride the buses and other modes of transportation to work. It is also to decentralize so all the traffic is not coming to Port of Spain from both east and south and west. You know, and that is part of the problem. So the decentralization was a very important part of that. And what this would have meant for us also in terms of policy is expanded networks of solar lighting. It would have involved security, for instance, for maxi-taxi centers. All of these things would have been part of a comprehensive and very, very integrated plan strategy for development of a country in a sustainable way, but also a recognition that we had to move away not only in diversification terms from oil and natural gas only, fossil fuels especially, but that we also had to green the economy in a certain way in order to create jobs that were connected to a new economy that was not energy dependent. Now, with regard to the tax break specifically in this particular bill for hybrid and electric vehicles, if you look at the Finance Act of 2015, that is to say when we were in government, you will see that we removed MVT, the motor vehicle tax, and we also removed VAT, the vehicle value-added tax, sorry. We removed those in 2015 from hybrid and electric cars 1 year ago. We did this for cars at the level of a 1599 cc's engine. And we, yes.
30 minutes have expired. You're entitled to 15 more minutes. Do you intend to avail yourself of it?
Yes.
You may proceed.
I'll try to complete within that time and perhaps before, Madam Speaker. So what the Minister of Finance has done today, what he's done today, is that he is continuing our policy by extending the policy, and I hope that he will admit that, and he's also sweetening the deal a little bit with an increase in engine side to 1999 cc's in the case of hybrid and electric cars. Indeed, a number of initiatives before the House today in this particular bill had genesis in our time. And what the government is now doing is basically carrying on with good and enlightened policies of the People's Partnership Government in the instances in which the main beneficiaries are the people of Trinidad and Tobago. But I want to shift gears a little bit, and I want to say that, so the main point that I'm making is that some of the measures continue our policy. Secondly, that you have to see our policy in terms of a more integrated and comprehensive policy framework in all the things that he's doing. And thirdly, I want to shift gears a little bit, because you cannot do what the government is doing forever, simply tinkering with the system at this time. Because this government, because of the situation in which we find ourselves, must address the issue of balance. They must address the issue of adjustment. They must address the issue of expenditure management. They must address the issue of revenue management. They must address the issue of stimulating growth. All of these things are required now. So I will talk to that particular issue in a minute, but I do want to deal with the income tax issue, where tax and amnesty is given to delinquent individuals and corporations, where a 25% tax credit is given for the conversion of CNG, and the tax waivers related to renting or selling of a multi-family dwelling until December 2025. Now, let me mention that the 2014-2015 incentives for the purchase of new and used hybrid and electric vehicles were provided, as I mentioned before. In 2016, we intended to apply these initiatives to larger engine hybrid vehicles, and the minister has done that. You are getting there, and in 2015, we did it for a certain size. You have increased the size. We support that. I want to say, though, that in 2015, 10% of the PTSC fleet was converted to CNG. Just so you know, and the population knows, Madam Speaker, our commitment was to convert the entire PTSC fleet to CNG by 2018. I don't know if the government will pursue that policy, but I would think that it is desirable policy. It has already started. It's a question of continuity. What is your plan for this? Our commitment was also to mandate large fleets in the governmental sector like WASA, TSTT, Petrotrin, and we had already begun in Petrotrin and WASA, to fully migrate to CNG by 2020, and it had begun. What is your plan? Are you going to pursue that? The new network of CNG stations to support this began a rollout in 2015. And your government is continuing the rollout. I know the Minister of Energy is very keen on this, and I want to offer congratulations in this regard, because the objective was also to facilitate by collaboration the maxi taxi fleet on the road so that we could get the conversion in the private sector. If the government pursues this policy, I think the country will benefit. I think the citizens would benefit. I think we would benefit internationally by carbon emissions reduction. And I think that we will move into an era of much more enlightened, sustainable development. I want to remind the Minister of Finance, though, that this Honorable House and citizens of this country, that we put in place benefits for construction that are being extended here today. And the minister did mention that. He said we ended it at 2018. His interpretation was that we did not understand how long it takes to get a building started or get the construction to begin. It was really that we were trying to, you might say, force or put the pressure on in terms of time so that we would get the economy moving on the construction sector, so to speak, and therefore we put a limited time. We were lobbied very heavily in 2015 to extend the time, and we had every intention of extending the time, and had we been in government, we would do it as you are doing it now. So we have no problem now. We have no problem with the extension. We think all of this thing is good for the country. It is good that construction creates jobs, that investors and entrepreneurs are given incentives to engage the economy positively. Now, I said I would get back to this issue of the changed circumstances in which we find ourselves. The IMF India report on Trinidad and Tobago actually suggests and forecasts that we could have a growth of 2.3% in 2017 and a growth of 3.2% in 2018. The reason that they can make these projections is because BP Juniper exists. It is because BP and EOG Resources Sercan exists. It is because BP onshore compression exists. These three projects together have the potential of increasing natural gas production by about 28% more than it is now in Trinidad and Tobago. By October next year, Juniper will begin to feed into the system. How is this possible? When in the last 10 months, all the Minister of Finance has been doing is criticizing and condemning the incentives which the People's Partnership government gave and crying down the energy companies which are investing in our country and basically making statements to intimidate and frighten long-term investors in our energy industry. So how can IMF predict growth on the basis of increased natural gas production and energy sector growth? It is because the People's Partnership government gave the incentives necessary, Madam Speaker, to make drilling and new production possible. So now we will receive in 2017 the benefits of the People's Partnership policy. Gas from BP Juniper, more gas from BP EOG Resources Sercan, more gas from BP onshore compression. For a decade, because of PNM policies of short-sightedness, there was no new drilling or investment for either oil or gas exploration in this country. Drilling started after this decade of drought, when the People's Partnership introduced incentives to stimulate exploration. Trinidad and Tobago, if you look at the energy map of the world, is one of the few places in the world where BP is actively drilling because of what our government did in 2010 and after. Now, having said that, I want to say that I have a little concern about something. Well, because part of the bill, has to do with the amnesty on taxes, part of which is in fact petroleum taxes. And I want to talk a little bit about the fact that I wonder if the Minister of Finance would use this opportunity to explain something for me, which is that we have said in this Parliament and in different places that we expected that on the basis of taxes, dividends, TGU payments, the IPO from Phoenix Gas, and a bank loan of $1 billion entered into in 2015, that we were set in motion to bring in $13 billion by the end of October 2015. Now, this was more than sufficient to wipe out what the minister likes to talk about, this $9 billion central bank overdraft and so on. Now, what I want to know is, did he collect that money? Did he collect that money, and what did he do with it? If my calculations are right, by the end of the third quarter this year, the Minister of Finance and his government will have collected, as the minister correctly said, the quarterly payment of taxes to the tune of about $27 billion at a quarterly cash flow rate of about $9 billion. So at least $18 billion should be in already. So 18 billion and 13, which was meant to be collected by the end of October 2015, would make a total of 31 billion. And the other 9 billion from the third quarter would make it 40 billion. So since September 7, 2015, the Minister of Finance and his government will have collected $40 billion up to the end of the third quarter this year. And if funding is late, at the very minimum, you would have about $31 billion. I am not saying this in a contentious way, and I am not asking this as a wicked question. I simply want an explanation. Did you collect $13 billion, as we indicated? Are you going to collect $27 billion based on 3/4 of receipts? And what has this money been used for? And what is it being used for by the government of Trinidad and Tobago? I also see no mention in this document of cigarette taxes in the bill which he announced in April. I also see no mention of alcohol taxes which were mentioned in April. I also see no mention of online sales tax which he also mentioned in April. So where is the income generation plan and revenue generation plan in this finance bill for 2016? So I want the minister to answer a little bit about what is happening on the revenue side. Where's the plan of the government to stimulate investment in growth? Do you have any plan for that? Do you have any plan for anything except the fiscal measures that you have brought here today? Now, if you listen to the population and you treat with the population outside, you realize that the population is seeing and feeling that nothing, absolutely nothing is happening in our country. The business and consumers alike cannot see or feel that the government is getting off the block. They feel that governance is at a standstill. They feel that the economy has been put on hold. People can feel that. People can see that. People are talking about it. Do you not think, Minister of Finance, and I raise this to you because of the roadshow issue that you mentioned, do you not think, Minister of Finance, through you, Madam Speaker, that the rating agencies will see through all of this? Don't you think that the rating agencies will behave as rating agencies generally behave and look through the veil to see exactly what is happening in terms of fiscal, monetary, and economic policy? Look at how you, Minister of Finance, have been mismanaging the process, in my view, of raising new loans. Moody's downgraded us at the end of March. The borrowing limits were approved by this Parliament at the end of December. Do you think our rating is going to be headed upwards or downwards? What do you think will happen to our projects going forward if you proceed with the policy that you have now, which reflects on the population as doing nothing? What do you think the market will be like now after Brexit? Look at the fall in commodity prices. Urea, methanol, ammonia. Why did you not phase your local borrowing to keep capital expenditure going instead of guiding the country into a standstill? Why did you not use local banks to meet local payment obligations? Why are you going to the US to raise money?
Additional time has expired. Attorney General.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity to join in this debate in relation to the Finance Bill number 2 of 2016. Before us is a bill which is 11 clauses long, including the short title, Commencement. We seek to amend 9 laws in particular. Madam Speaker, one would normally start by responding to the contribution of the previous speaker, and perhaps I ought to do that at the start. I do appreciate that there was a lot that could have been done by the last government, a lot that should have been done by the last government, and that there was a lot of trajectory and planning that goes into the mix. But regrettably, and quite simply, it was not done. We are here to deal with a Finance Bill number 2. It is essentially to convert certain promises and undertakings provided for in the budget into law, mainly with the purpose of ensuring that either taxes are collected or benefits are applied. We seek to traverse a few laws only. However, some of them stand out quite starkly. I will leave for the Honourable Minister of Finance the many questions posited by the last speaker. Obviously, suffice it to say the Minister of Finance has been on record in explaining a host of issues, be it the need to borrow US dollars because of the deficit in the economy in terms of the receipt of US dollars as a result of the collapse of oil prices and as a result of the provision of tax holidays which were given. One would think it axiomatic that it would be more prudent to search for US dollars. $1 billion US dollars into the economy is certainly something which is required by the economy right now. So the Honourable Member, having asked why not borrow from local banks and local dollars in certain senses, in one sense that can be taken in a different point. Madam Speaker, the laws which I propose to focus upon in particular in this bill have to deal with three areas of the bill. The first one would be to touch upon the questions asked by the Honourable Minister with respect to the Visiting Forces Act, that is the SOFA agreement as it's referred to. The second area which I propose to focus upon would be the Companies Act, and the third area which I propose to focus upon would be the benefits which are being given, if I could just simply categorize it, in the construction sector. May I start first with the SOFA, or the Visiting Forces Act. The Honourable Member asked for an explanation as to what is being given in terms of benefits to entities, what kind of services, what kind of contractors. He asked about the mutual relationship. And he focused upon the fact that this is being dealt with in the law as we do now in seeking to amend Visiting Forces Act Chapter 1404. Permit me to offer an explanation as follows, Madam Speaker. The background behind this amendment is to be found in international obligations between Trinidad and Tobago and the United States of America. Specifically, we are looking at the status of forces agreement between the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and the government of the United States of America. And there is some history to this particular point which I think I'm obliged to put on the record now. The first thing is that this SOFA, as it is referred to, is not the first of its kind. What, in fact, stands as a springboard for this particular amendment now started in 2009 when the Summit of the Americas was being held and the United States of America entered into treaty obligation with Trinidad and Tobago, specifically in or around April 2009, I believe it was the 1st of April. The agreement then was specifically to allow visiting forces from the United States of America to attend into Trinidad and Tobago for the purpose of the engagement of the 5th Summit of the Americas. That came with associated benefits. Coming out of that relationship with the US, we saw the birth of technical assistance and certain aspects of training. I'm putting it in very simple terms. Of course, there was a significant amount of work done for the Summit of the Americas. But suffice it to say, that agreement proved to be so useful that it was in fact extended in April 2009 for 1 year, and that came to expire in September 2009. It was then agreed by the last government to be extended in 2011 and in 2013, and it expired in September 2015. So the last government would have had the experience of having had the SOFA operate by way of 2 extensions of time. There was the obvious benefit of training that was passing to and fro. Specifically, members opposite would have had the agreement, and I wish to put on the record, there would have been a note from the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs. The actual agreement itself would have been tabled at the last cabinet, and that agreement, in fact, is almost in identical terms 2009, 2010, 2011, 2013, 2015. So what is being put into law now springboards from a form of agreement which both the last government, now opposition, has had and which this government has seen benefit in. What we treat with in terms of the legislation right now is specifically amendments to the definitions clauses so that we can get some clarity requested by the Customs and Excise Division. Specifically, the term visiting forces contractors is being defined right now because we're moving away from the limited definition where there was an association only to police, visiting police forces, and going to the broader contracting forces. But the contracting forces is one which is carefully applied. First of all, there are two safeguards. One, the government of Trinidad and Tobago must agree to that which is being requested. Secondly, the minister must certify that as a subset of point 1. But the second caution is that it is not on a reciprocal basis, meaning Trinidad and Tobago isn't obliged to deal with this from a demand perspective. It is subject to Trinidad and Tobago's agreement. And it is specifically intended to allow for the hiring of contractors, be they local or be they foreign, when visiting forces are here, to allow them to actually carry out work and to provide the concession, which is a committee between states. So there's nothing sinister behind this. It is formalizing the difficulties which were observed by the Customs and Excise Division in all of the previous SOFAs that stood in existence in the period 2009 come to date. Sure?
To clarify two things. Am I hearing you correctly in saying that the request must come from the United States and we must agree, and it's not the other way around, first of all? And secondly, that the extension involves these contracting services. In this particular instance, it will only be foreign contractors, according to the bill. Can you explain to me what is the range of these contracted services that are foreign, which accompany anybody else that comes militarily from the
Sure.
US?
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Yes, in answer to your first question, it is not only a statement which I now make, but it is contained in the parent law. And with respect to the second position, the type of services, it is perhaps a matter of public record that the United States military has contracted out a vast number of their services. For instance, in many jurisdictions around the world, they use contracting entities together with them. The minister, of course, must be requested, and the minister makes the recommendation to His Excellency the President, or instructs accordingly, because it's by cabinet decision, and His Excellency the President prescribes. So it is to take account of the actual operationality by the United States of America. And I want to stress something on this point. I wish to press pause for a moment on a very important but related matter to this, to say, I salute most profusely and offer warmest and greatest congratulations to the Coast Guard of Trinidad and Tobago, who having been trained by certain foreign entities, including the United States of America, conducted the largest drug bust in Trinidad and Tobago, $39.5 odd million in pure cocaine intercepted on the seas in Trinidad and Tobago. And I'd like to say this.
That's not bigger than
I said the largest most recently. The Monas Island bust was 720. It was quite some time ago. But on this occasion, people were caught red-handed. And the fact is, this came about A, by way of training, B, by way of coordinated information management between foreign entities, etc. There have in fact been some other activities which I can't speak about publicly, which have made a significant dent in the drug trafficking trade as a result of intelligence-driven activity, where major cartel members have been secured. And what I can tell you, the message which came out from the Coast Guard, and I say this most sincerely, imagine what we could have done if we had offshore patrol vessels for the last 5 years.
Come on.
No. This has been said by the Coast Guard. I say this because coming out of the SOFA arrangement and the intelligence-driven policing that we have now, and the training which has been given, Trinidad and Tobago has had the benefit of a government coming into tow, taking vessels procured by the last government, putting it to work, but not sending them back because we have some disagreement or not. I've not been pejorative. I'm just stating a point. Now, I'm hearing the Honourable Member for Tewarie talk about the OPVs being lemons. In the SOFA arrangement conducted by the College of Defence, is that what we call it? Most recently in Trinidad, carried out by the United States themselves, here in Trinidad and Tobago, where they brought their training in. It was at that very conference that the so-called lemons came up for discussion. I'm only dealing with the talk from the member for Tewarie, because it was the British vessels that went to Brazil, and it was the Brazilian admiral who said, how could you ever have given them up, your Trinidad-class vessels? So I don't accept that they were lemons. But let me not get derailed on this point. In fact, I believe there are 10 more on order. Madam Speaker, I want to turn to a very important area that this law treats with, and I'd like to explain the connectivity of the plan which is afoot. We will see in this bill there is a specific amendment to the Companies Act, Chapter 8101. People simply latch on to the fact that we're talking about a tax amnesty, an amnesty with respect to the filings for company returns. But I want to unveil today exactly how important a measure we have on the table right now, and to connect the dots on what the government is doing. Perhaps I should start by putting onto the record some critical information in a different way, because it's never been done before. We've actually had amnesties with respect to the filing of companies' documents in the period 10th October 2011 to 31st December 2012, one amnesty, and then again on the 1st of October 2014 to 31st of March 2015. But let me put the statistics out into the public domain now. In terms of entities that are registered at the company's registry, we have two types. We have businesses and companies. Businesses are registered under the Business Name Act, the Registration of Business Names Act, Chapter 8285. And then we have companies that are registered under the Companies Act, Chapter 8101. Businesses, obviously, in this context, don't fall for the amnesty, but I just want to put the numbers onto the record. Of businesses, meaning firms, partnerships, etc., and individuals, we should note, of firms under the Registration of Business Act, we have of firms 22,585 firms on the register. Individuals who are trading as, John Brown trading as X, we have 101,822 individuals. Sole traders, etc. Companies, the current record shows as at 14th June 2016, there are, of the three classes of companies, that's non-profit, private profit, and public profit, non-profit companies number 6,474. Private profit number 68,494. Public profit 82. Add businesses and companies, we have in terms of entities 199,457. 75,050 of which are companies, non-profit, private profit, public profit, which fall under this particular finance bill which we're dealing with. Now I put those numbers into the record because Trinidad and Tobago is wrestling with criminality. In wrestling with criminality, this government has said the Proceeds of Crime Act is not yielding the fruit that it should yield. Assets are not being forfeited. Why? Because the Proceeds of Crime Act is pegged to a conviction, a predicate offense. You must be convicted for a crime to go through the Proceeds of Crime Act to have the assets forfeited. We have had next to none in terms of efficiency. There are a couple of them. The most famous case right now involves someone who's now at St. Anne's for medical observation, but we have not seen the efficacy, and that has been observed in two very important places. One, in the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force 4th round mutual evaluation for Trinidad and Tobago, which has said 27 countries examining Trinidad and Tobago, they've said, look, you are going to be put into enhanced follow-up and required to significantly deliver on what you show your efficiency to be in terms of dealing with crime and money laundering in particular, financing of terrorism in particular. They said, look, that is a poor score for your country. But the second area which has come to observe this is the World Bank's National Risk Assessment, which we met as a country, we met as a government, and that National Risk Assessment, which will be published very shortly, I can tell you, does not speak positively to our area of efficiency there. What we have right now in Trinidad and Tobago, coming back to statistics, in companies of the 75,000 odd companies, 28,077 have not filed all of their annual returns. 29,912 have filed no annual returns at all, ever. 29,912. That's roughly 58,000, close to 68,000 entities. Now, connecting the dots, if you look to the legislative agenda of the government, you will notice if the Proceeds of Crime Act is not working, if you are not biting the big fish, look, we've caught the drugs on the boat this weekend, Coast Guard, $39 million. Some people made the observation, well, it's small fries you catch, the fellas who drive in the boat. Where was it going? Who sent it? Who gets the profit of crime? Very good concerns. The proverbial Mr. Big. Big fish, small fish, middle fish. People want to know where they are. This government has committed, Madam Speaker, to taking the profit out of crime. And I want to say today, when we seek to give the amnesty to cause the filing of companies' returns for nearly 60,000 companies. So what? Yes, 60,000 companies odd. What we are doing and putting Trinidad and Tobago on notice is that we are going to aggressively move behind all those defaulting companies in a very tight matrixed approach, which I'll explain in a moment. No, this is fine. And I'll tell you why. If you don't bring your annual returns up to date, one, the penalties are going to revert. Let me give you the statistics behind the penalties. For the period 1998 to 2016, this total sum of penalties that can be applied, that's the $300 per month per entity. Here what the figure actually is. 1998 to 2016, it is $347,492,780 in penalties. One could argue that there could be a prescriptive period for the levying of taxation or penalties. If you were to take a 6-year limitation period, the figure is actually $88,343,000 just for filing returns. In fact, in 2011, 2012, come to date, total penalties collected for 2010, for example, 15,700,000 odd. 2011, 12,844 odd. 2012, it was $2 because there was an amnesty. 2013, $12 million odd. 2014, roughly $10 million, 9,948 odd. 2015, 9,556. So even though an amnesty was applied in 2014, there was still $9 million in penalties collected. So point number one, if you don't file your annual returns, you're going to have the penalties brought back to you. And you can see, even after the provision of an amnesty in 2014, that's $10 million odd to the revenue. Position number two, if you don't file, you will be struck off the register. And when you're struck off the register, I want to put onto the record now that we are looking, in terms of strike-offs, we are looking at total number of non-profit companies struck off: 2011, 7, 2012, 31, 2013, 33, 2014, 117, 2015, 38. Total number of profit companies struck off: 2011, 298, 2012, 2,189, 2013, 1,034. 2014, 2,701. 2015, 523. For total number of companies struck off each year then, 305 for 2011, 2,220 for 2012. 2013, we saw 1,067 companies. 2014, 2,818. 2015, 561. Now let me, pardon? Criteria for strike-off is if you have not met the annual returns filings, other documents filings, etc. Now I want to put on record, we heard the Honourable Member for Caroni Central talk about continuation and what the last government did, etc. I want to put on record the compliance unit that procured the figures and application of arrears which caused the strike-off, etc. I want to put on record that started in January 2010 under a P&M administration. And commendably, the last government continued with the approach. We are now about, if I could use this phrase, to put it on steroids. And I'll tell you why. The second point that I was making is strike-off. But the third point that I'm making is a huge point. You will see on the legislative agenda that we are making amendments to the Companies Act, Financial Intelligence Units Act. We're asking for consideration there, Board of Inland Revenue. But in the Companies Registry, let me flag right now, we intend to unmask the beneficial owners. We intend to have equitable owners produced to the public so that you can no longer sequester assets using a legal nominee to hide a beneficial ownership. But let me connect the dots even further. The reason for all of this is that it ties into what has been recommended as a requirement for Trinidad and Tobago by the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force and coming out of the National Risk Assessment, but it ties into our government's agenda, which is that we are going behind the profit of crime by hitting the hardest zone possible. Explain your wealth legislation, civil asset forfeiture. You see, it's only after you clean up a company's register, it's only after you make beneficial ownerships known, it's only after you amend the laws of trust, and you'll see it on the legislative agenda, so that you have declarations that you are going to be in a position to say, we know who you are. We are now going to say, if you can't explain your wealth, you will lose your wealth. So every drug man who owns a massive mansion, every person who is involved in corruption, who on paper earning $5 a month, $2,000 a month, and has assets coming through their nose that they can't explain how they acquired, all of those people now, unmasking the beneficial ownership, are going to be called upon under the civil asset forfeiture regime, for which one can find precedent in Jamaica and in the Cayman Islands. Under that regime, you are going to be at risk of losing your wealth. Imagine, honorable members, through you, Madam Speaker, if 6 speed guns could change the culture of Trinidad and Tobago to cause this country to slow down overnight. Imagine what the specter of civil asset forfeiture properly laid out on clean records would look like. You see, the last opportunities that we engaged in twice under the last government, nobody put forward the statistics. Nobody explained how many companies were in the mix. Nobody explained how much money was at risk. Nobody tied it into a larger objective. I'm unveiling it today. This is how we will change our country. This is how we will grapple with corruption. This is how we will tell people, you better be able to explain how you have acquired this. Because in our country, if people are too afraid to step forward and give evidence, if everybody can say, this one corrupt, that one corrupt, so-and-so knows this, you know, that's a double-edged sword. Because they label politicians, for instance, as corrupt people. Lots of people say this one and that one. Well, by this mechanism, you don't have to label anybody again, you know. You will know. Either you can explain, or you can't explain. Either you have filed your taxes on time and paid what you have, or you have not and you will have to explain. You see, tightening the net is the critical thing. And if the system didn't work before, if proceeds of crime legislation didn't work, if predicate offenses didn't work, you can't get a conviction in court because, for instance, you have an inquiry. Let's look at the PR Court Airport inquiry. No stones cast. But look, as a country, no, I understand, I'm talking about as a country, both for persons who are accused, who are under the gun, and for the country, there's a balancing act. Surely the people who are accused want to clear their names and deserve the right to do so in the shortest time possible. But the country also wants some resolution as well. There's a sense of frustration or hopelessness in our citizenry that say, well, look, John Brown could do anything they want because there's no consequence. So let's look at that balancing act. Is it appropriate that we as a country, when was the airport built? 1999? 1999, we are now in 2016. There's been no resolution. We're still in the magistrate's court there. 17 years. 17 years later, we are in the magistracy still. We have reached High Court, Court of Appeal, Privy Council. 17 years later. So if that is what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago, understand how nuclear a device civil asset forfeiture is. Understand what we can do if we come together, taking a veil of simple techniques as we put forward in this finance bill now, and clean up the register, bring 60,000 people into the daylight, and if they don't come into the daylight, they'll be treated as well, because we know where to go as well. Bring the revenue onto the table. But importantly, when we come as a country to say enough is enough, time to take the profit out of crime, that's where we'll be doing this country a service. Now let me add that further. My learned colleague, Minister Young, together with Senator Franklin Kahn, is championing campaign finance reform. We have seen the Honourable Minister of Finance take the procurement legislation brought by the last government, supported, some fighting over the issues, but add public procurement, campaign finance reform, civil asset forfeiture, and understand how you tighten the net now, so that there are no longer any unknown beneficiaries behind political parties, so that procurement is brought into the light. Because let's face it, politicians come, politicians go. You would faster find dark spaces of corruption in those people that work in contracts with state enterprises or with ministries. Hardly ever you will find anybody in this country able to point with evidence to people who may sit in public life. That situation will change, however, if we as a country say, look, let us take a different approach. And it all starts with cleaning up your company's registry. I want to say this. You would have heard that the government is operationalizing the government campus project, the Legal Affairs Tower, now the Attorney General and Legal Affairs Tower, etc. But in doing that, what we have been doing is to go into the vaults, particularly at Legal Affairs Division, cleaning the register one by one, book by book. And I wish to pay a compliment to the hardworking staff at the registry who work in intolerable conditions and circumstances. But migrating that data into the official record is so critical. I wish to also pay compliment to the Minister of Finance, not for this bill today, but for another very important mechanism. The Minister of Finance. Yes.
Your 30 minutes have expired. You're entitled to 15 more minutes. So you can proceed, and we'll take the break at 4:30.
I'll try to end before the break. Much obliged, ma'am. I wish to pay compliment to the Minister of Finance for balancing the accounts of Trinidad and Tobago, particularly from an information management perspective. In short, the Honourable Minister of Finance is taking the data, putting it into a system where we can actually track receipts and revenue. And to Trinidad and Tobago, what that means when you bring your financial management system into the modern era is that you can have faster payments to contractors. You can deal with VAT returns. You can deal with set-off mechanisms, perhaps. Not speaking for the Minister of Finance. But inside of modernizing your data management at the Ministry of Finance, you are moving to a whole of government accounting arrangement. And that has been the problem for us as a country. So what we have in our small neck of the woods is not a contest to see how many pieces of law you could pass, how many tick the boxes of equations you can go through. What you really want to focus on as a country is in making sure you've operationalized these systems in as sensible approach as possible. And I have just given you some of the ideology and connectivity behind the Attorney General's mission, our office's mission, ably assisted by the Honourable Minister in the Ministry of the Attorney General and Office of Prime Minister and many other hats that he's called upon to wear, Minister Young, in the pursuit of connecting the dots. I'm also pleased to say that has taken us, for instance, in the AGLA's office to drive the very important amendments which the National Anti-Money Laundering Committee has set out for us. And the National Anti-Money Laundering Committee is one which is an extremely efficient cabinet-appointed committee in a combination of maneuvers. And we are progressing mutual assistance in criminal matters, amendments to the Proceeds of Crime Act, legislation for beneficial ownership, BIR and FIU amendments, money remittances, non-profit sector, civil asset forfeiture, of course assisted by whistleblowing and anti-terrorism, because there's financing in anti-terrorism, companies that remain uncleaned. Let me point out this, the drugs in the juice can, those transactions that allow the shipment of the juice cans to the United States of America happen via a defunct company on the register. The company had stopped filing returns. Whoever perpetrated the crime noticed that the company was defunct, picked up the documentation for the company and simply shipped it under that end. That's the danger of not cleaning your company's registry. And that's why we have taken this opportunity, not only from a revenue perspective, but importantly from a crime-fighting perspective, to clean that register, tie it in with civil asset forfeiture, tie it in with unmasking beneficial ownership so that the country can see results. And I give an undertaking that best efforts are afoot. That if 6 speed guns could change our culture so significantly, imagine what laws of this type will do. Go and read the jurisprudence in Ireland, which is a more draconian standard of civil asset forfeiture, and see what can happen in your country. Honourable members, there is perhaps reflection on the last point in the 4 minutes I've committed myself to speak again. Oh yes, and it's on this point as well. There are concessions given for developers in this bill. It started commendably under the last government. I remember when Senator Barrett piloted it, but unfortunately there was not the mechanism to make it happen or an appreciation of the time frame. So I believe only 2 people have applied in that entire time since it came out, because the process and forms to get it done, what is to be supplied, who is to process it, how is it to be dealt with, none of the minutiae, the important minutiae was put onto the table. You needed the details. Now, I must, of course, declare openly that I have an interest in this. I am, of course, in another incarnation and wearing a different hat. I have developed many a property and site, and I have done so within the period of time since Senator Barrett first piloted that, and I would be eligible and am eligible to make application under this law as it exists right now, even before it's extended. So I declare my interest openly. But the fact is this. What we have before us now is a significant development, because I would like honourable members to focus upon the fact that it involves concessions for sale of homes and leasing of homes, so that the initiative to the private sector is so significant that this is what can jumpstart your economy. The first thing that was required was to settle the economy. Get the discipline back into Trinidad and Tobago that, look, it's not every bill that you present that's going to get paid. It must be measured, there must be value for money, the cycles must be clean and clear. The second aspect, of course, now that you've got your dust settled, find the money, find the balancing. And that must now be tied into the incentives to the business development. And San Fernando West, San Fernando as a city can look forward to significant development as our waterfront project, as a commitment that has been given by the committee and those that have spoken to this quite publicly. It is a priority item, as the Minister of Housing will attest, in the arrangements that are afoot right now to better the public-private partnership arrangements so that the economy can be stimulated. Find the money, settle the economy, create the incentives in a reasonable, rational fashion in an adequate time frame, and then you've got your economy kicking. So I'm absolutely confident that in the months ahead of us, moving to the next budget, there are no surprises, there'll just be smiles. And the smiles are the incentives that are there, palatable incentives, incentives which can be operationalized so that we as a country can now purchase the benefit of discipline, production, and tolerance in a clean atmosphere. Madam Speaker, I undertook to finish at the break. I'm just about 10 seconds away. May I simply thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this bill. I look forward to honourable members' contribution. We are looking at the point raised by the honourable leader of the opposition, and I'm sure the Minister of Finance will assist with that in short measure. I thank you very much.
Members, we shall take the suspension now. We resume at 5 o'clock.